The coaching session you're about to watch is a calculation exercise and game playthrough focused lesson that I just had with a student of mine named Jack, who's rated a bit over 1700 USCF. As you'll see during the lesson, we're going to begin by doing some calculation exercises and puzzle warm-up. I'll also give you the viewers the opportunity or chance to pause the video and figure out what you would do in each position yourself. And later in the lesson, we're going to be doing a playthrough of a game I played back when I was rated close to the rating of 2000, quite a long time ago. And you'll get more opportunities to figure out your own answers to the various positions and questions that I posed during that game. So without further ado, let's get right into the coaching session, and I hope you enjoy. All right, so just to review real quick what we talked about during our previous lesson. Last week we had begin with some calculation warm-up positions, doing a little bit of that just to start with. After that, I showed you one of my game examples, or a particular game that I played quite a long time ago, back in the past, where I played against one of my first national master opponents. Ended up winning that particular game. We got through part of the game, didn't finish it up, but we will be looking at some other game examples throughout the course of the lesson here today. And yeah, so what we're going to do, kind of similar to last week, is going to start off with a little bit of calculation warm-up once again. We'll probably just do like 2 positions to begin with, and then we'll move on into some more game playthrough, things like that, and we'll kind of take it from there at that point. So let me give you a first kind of tactic or calculation warm-up example to take a look at. So this is going to be from White's perspective. And it's going to look like this here. Let's clear up the board. Put some pieces on it. And check it out. So here it is White's move right now. And yeah, so White to play in this position. And you have to figure out the best way for White to play from here. So take your time, think through it, and see if you can come up with what White should do.
Yeah, I was in trouble with this. I can't really see a great, I guess, sequence of moves here. A few things that I've considered have been like bishop g5, just to try to do this, which is almost checkmate and would win the queen. But I mean, there's only really like one great way to defend, and that's rook f8. But I didn't really see a great follow-up after this. I looked at a few different things. Like, I think the main problem is we can't go like bishop e7 or something like that, because queen takes f4. It like leads to like, if not checkmate, it just leads to a perpetual check in a bunch of situations. And I didn't really see a different other way to respond to rook f8. I think queen e7 is also something that I considered, but I thought just queen g7 for black, and that's kind of just like everything is defended pretty much. So yeah, I didn't really see how to continue from here, because bishop g5 doesn't work. I looked at a few other things as well, like I mean looking at trading queens, but it doesn't really make any sense because we're down material and we don't really get anything concrete out of it. I also looked at queen c6 to just attack the rook, but then we don't like really get anything out of that either. The rook will just move away somewhere. So yeah, I couldn't really see the continuation here, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's examine that first sequence you gave a little bit more. So you were looking at bishop g5, which creates a very big threat with bishop f6 check, and then black, like you said, would play rook f8, which makes a ton of sense to cover the f6 square. And then from there, we didn't really see like a great follow-up at that point. And it very well may be that there is not really a great follow-up if the rook gets to the f8 square. So is there a way that we can keep that similar idea in mind, but find kind of a way to work around black's defense?
Okay. Maybe we could try something like Queen E7 maybe to kind of just with the idea that we're covering F8 and we're just gonna play Bishop D5 next because it seems like there's not really a lot of like now that I look at it, there's not really that many good moves for Black. The Queen is kind of stuck on this diagonal because of the checkmate threat, and there's not really a good spot for the rook that really does anything productive. So maybe we can afford wasting this kind of like, I mean, it's not really a waste of a move, but it's like we're not actually doing anything forcing. But I think maybe if we do this first, we can just do this next because like Black can't really move these pieces anywhere useful. It looks like.
Okay, so let's say we did Queen E7.
I guess maybe,
Let's.
I guess maybe the one thing that we would have to look at is like King G8, like if the king just starts running. But
Yep.
I think maybe in that case we can just let's see. I feel like we might just still be able to go Bishop F6, but that we're just gonna go here and then like kind of still try the same stuff. But I'm not 100% sure. Let me take a look at that real quick. Let's see.
Yeah, this particular exercise or puzzle is all about figuring out the opponent's defenses and working around them. So the fact that you're looking for, you noticed Rook F8 if we did Bishop G5 right away. You're noticing King G8 if we play Queen E7 and trying to find an answer for that. So yeah, think from this Queen E7, King G8 kind of situation.
Yeah. I'm not really seeing a great way to answer King G8 after Queen E7. Maybe we can just go Queen F7 first at the beginning, with the idea that we're kind of still just doing the same idea, but just a different square, so that we don't have to deal with King G8. That might actually just work out this. It looks like it should just work out the same way.
Okay, so we're seeing that if we go Queen E7 and Black maybe plays King to G8, we would really like to zigzag the bishop to F6, but one other thing we have to keep in mind there is that like Queen takes F4 would still be a possibility.
That's true. Yeah.
Or the Queen can go like Queen D5, Queen back to F7 or something like that. So like, just for example here, even Queen G7 right away looks good, but this looks like a pretty solid defense for Black. So then the other move now you're looking at is Queen F7, where we kind of keep the king locked in the corner a bit longer. And then we still have the same Bishop G5 to F6 plan in mind. And here we would have to figure out, is there a different defense that Black has available? Can he do anything about Bishop G5 followed by Bishop F6? And in this case, it doesn't end up that there is a good answer. There's really no way to stop Bishop G5 in the first place. And you can't really do something like Rook D8 to D6 to cover this, because then Queen F8 would be checkmate. So I think, there's really not much Black can do here. If they try Rook G8, we go here. If they try Rook G7, we can just pin the Rook and. Oh no, sorry, we don't want to pin the Rook here. What would we do in this situation actually?
We can just give this check. The Rook has to go back, and then we can have Bishop. Then we just have Bishop F6, and we win the Queen.
Yeah, there you go. So just important, one little final nuance here. We check first, then make the fork, and then this is pretty much game over. We don't want to play Bishop F6 right away, because then Queen takes F4 is going to cause us some. I think there might be a perpetual check here. Even if there wasn't, I think it's just a lot simpler to make all of your moves be a check. And then you win the Queen without even needing to worry about Queen takes F4 check at this point. Okay, so this one's a little bit tricky in the sense of, there's not really any forcing moves right here at the start. There's no checks we can immediately do that are great. There's no captures. Here it's kind of about figuring out the threats that we can work towards making, but not only doing them right away with like immediately playing Bishop G5, but also thinking about like the defenses that our opponent might do in response.
Right.
If we do this right away, as you pointed out, Rook F8's a solid defense. If we do Queen E7, then the king gets to try escaping a little bit, which makes things at least a little bit trickier. I guess technically you could check and then go back to F7, but why not go to F7 in the first place? And right. once we kind of come around to the understanding that Queen F7 shuts down as many defensive moves from Black as possible, now it's very tough for them to stop this little zigzag of the bishop. And this is, there's just nothing Black can do. and we're gonna win the queen within a couple of moves. Okay, very nice. Let's do one more kind of calculation position, then we'll move on to some more. There, pawns. And okay, I think this is it. Yeah. Okay. So white's moving this position here, and see if you can figure out the best way to play from this position.
All right, so I think what I would do here is my first move is rook takes f7, just because it opens up some stuff for later. I think if the king takes, then we just play knight d6 and win the queen, which is pretty kind of the more simple route, obviously. But if the rook does end up taking, then I think I looked at a bunch of moves. I think knight, like the knight here is, I think it's like. Oh, actually, now that I look at it again, it might be fine. Let's see. No, yeah, it doesn't really work because like black can just take. I think that was the move that I looked at first, but I don't think it's all that good. Because the rook takes. I think the best move is actually rook d7, which looks pretty crazy, but I think it works just because like I think we have pretty much all of the options covered. I think if black does go ahead and take the rook, then we can just play knight d6 and we win the queen again, and so we're going to be out material after all that stuff like trades off, um, after all the pieces leave the board. And then if let's see what other options were there. If black ignores and just goes rook d8 or something like that to defend the rook, then we can go knight d6 because now this is pinned again to the queen, and then we just have the queen's hit. Black can't even take e4. We can attack this bishop too. If like queen c6 or something, then maybe we just go, I don't know, like just rook takes, and then we probably just win. So yeah, I think that was what I came up with. So rook takes, rook d7, and I didn't really see a great response for black after that.
Okay, very good. This is the sequence of moves. There is some potential defenses that black could try, but it does end up that we have a good answer for each of them. So let's just kind of put it on the board here. So take the bishop. First of all, if the king takes, then we can just check and take the queen. That's definitely game over. So the rook takes, and then yeah, rook d7 is the important follow-up move at this point. If he takes, probably taking is black's best move, but it's still going to be good for white because, like you said, we can check and take the queen. You can also take the pawn and then take the queen. Both of those work. I guess taking the pawns may be just a little bit better because you might as well pick up an extra pawn. And then this is very good for white. The nice thing is that even if black did trap the knight, which is not that easy to do, but even if he did win the knight somehow, we would still have a queen versus two rooks, and black's pawns are terrible.
Yeah.
So there's only one open file. The queen is going to outperform the rooks here. We'd also have like a pass pawn we could make down the road on the queen side. So this is very good for white. Black could try a move like rook f8 to protect the rook. And then what would we do in this situation?
Oh yeah. So I think maybe I said this, but if I didn't, I meant to. I think knight d6 is now the move because, like now the reason it works is because like this is repinned, because the rook is there again, like kind of like it was in the beginning, just different rook. And I think like black has no defense here. Like he's gonna lose either the queen or the rook, and probably a lot more than the rook if he loses the rook. So.
Yeah, there you go. You might have said it. I might just not have heard. But yeah, knight d6 is strong at this point. If he takes, we win the queen, and his rook is still pinned. And if he doesn't take, if he moves the queen somewhere, we can take with the rook or knight on f7. I think probably taking with the rook is the simplest. I don't know if it really makes a huge difference. If he takes, we take. We're gonna be up a piece and probably mate pretty soon. And if he takes the knight first, then we have a couple of different discovered checks that will win the queen. So maybe check and take the queen, and white is completely winning in this position here. So yeah, so a lot of the idea here revolves around, like, we want to play knight d6. The problem with knight d6 at the start, of course, is that our own knight was pinned. We're simply going to lose our queen, which is bad. So the way we get around this is by getting rid of the bishop first, and then this rook d7 move is kind of probably the tougher move to see in the position, but once we see this possibility of kind of putting the rook on this empty square, black doesn't really have a great defense at this point, and we're going to win material, which is nice. Okay, very nice job on those couple of positions there. Now, let's move on into another game playthrough example. And this, so last week we had looked at a game that I played against a national master back when I was a little bit under 2,000 rated myself. The next game we're going to look at is going to be actually from the very next round in that exact same tournament, but I'm playing against a this guy was probably a FIDE master back then, but he eventually became a grandmaster down the road. But my opponent's name is Daniel Ludwig, and we're going to take a look at this particular game. Now, this is a game that I did not win, so you're going to see if you can find improvements on my play. Okay. And yeah, we'll kind of go through some of the key spots in this game. I don't think this guy plays chess anymore, not quite honestly, but I know that I'm pretty sure he became a grandmaster down the road, and his little brother actually also started playing chess, and his little brother is an international master too. So pretty strong family of chess players. Yeah. I remember when his little brother was like 1,400, and I used to, win all my games against him pretty much. But now he's an international master now, and I think we I think we still go back and forth, but it's obviously quite a lot more difficult to beat the guy. Right. Anyways, so I was playing white in this game. I'll kind of click through the opening or play through it here real quick. So d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, knight f6. So he's playing the Slav defense. I played knight f3 here. He took the pawn. I play the move a4 in order to prevent black from reinforcing the pawn with b5. He brings the bishop out. I play e3. I get the pawn back. This is pretty much just opening theory at this point. And eventually we get around to here. Oh, sorry. Actually, after I castled, he played knight d7 first. I played queen e2. He castled now. I played e4. He played bishop g6. And we'll pick up on this position here. So in this position in the game, I think, as I might have mentioned in last week, back at this time period when I was playing at about almost 2,000 rating, I didn't really have great opening knowledge. I would know like maybe the first 7 moves of a game, but definitely at this point in this game, I didn't really have anything memorized. I was kind of on my own to think at this point. And in this position, I ended up playing a bad move. We'll look at that in just a moment. But let's see if you can find maybe something better that white should play instead. So white's move here, and think how you would play as white.
Okay. So just logically, because I don't know this opening, so should I just
more on just kind of the logic side of things.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have anything memorized or completely known at this point either. I mean, if we think about it in a general sense here, we have a space advantage, which is pleasant, but black is applying pressure to our center with his knight and both his bishops. So there's pluses and minuses here for sure. But yeah, we just have to kind of figure out how we would play from here as white at this point.
All right. After thinking about it a bit, I think I would probably go ahead and play e5. I don't know if that's. I mean, it's kind of has its pros and cons. I think I don't know if it's the I guess the most positionally accurate move, but I think that's probably what I would play just because I don't really see anything better. I think the idea is that this knight is kind of it's being pressured. I think black might, black is obviously threatening just to take and then to take the pawn, which is not great for us. I didn't really see a great way to defend the pawn like actively. I think knight d2 is kind of, it's very passive. I think then you have to worry about stuff like knight b6, threatening to win the bishop pair and also hitting our d4 pawn with the queen, which now is very difficult to defend, seeing as how we just moved our knight away, and we're also blocking the d file. So I don't know how much we'd really like that. I think if we wanted to go, knight b3 to defend it, of course, black could just take c3 and then just take e4. So that didn't really seem super great to me. So I looked at other ways to defend the pawn, maybe like bishop d3, but again, that's pretty passive. Kind of same knight b4 stuff could still be irritating. Maybe c5 at the right time. And so yeah, that just felt passive to me. Like bishop d3 would probably be my move if I really had to not play e5 for some reason. But I think I like the idea behind e5 because we're effectively forcing the knight to go to d5 unless it wants to go over here for some reason and get kicked out. So I think it goes into d5. Seeing as how this is considering he doesn't want to take this, which he probably doesn't. If he takes it, then we would just take here, and then his bishop kind of has to back away, which is kind of awkward. So I think knight d5, we'd follow it up by just taking it, and then kind of the pawn structure is fixed, so we don't actually have a backward pawn here. It just looked like we were going to have one, but we don't. And then I think from there we're looking pretty good. We have still like a bit of a space advantage, but the position is a little bit more closed down. We also managed to not lose the bishop pair, which is good, no matter which way he takes it. And so I wouldn't be super unhappy with a position like that. After this e5 and the trade of knights, we could even potentially just not trade knights. We could just play bishop d2. But I think it'd probably be simpler just to trade knights to make sure we don't have to deal with like a bad pawn in the future. So that was kind of my thinking. I didn't really see another like good way positionally to defend the pawn. There are definitely ways to do it, but they all seemed a little bit passive. So I think this is what I would end up going with.
Okay, so you like the move e5? Definitely better than what I played in the game, which we'll look at in just a moment. So I think e5 is perfectly good here. I think bishop d3, as you mentioned, is also fine. If we look at the opening explorer, it pretty much does show those are the top two moves, or at least the two most popular moves in the position by a pretty big margin. And it looks like bishop d3 has a higher score, I guess, compared to e5, but I think e5 also looks perfectly good, quite honestly. And if black does play knight d5, I do think it makes the most amount of sense to maybe go make that trade on the d5 square. I think you could also play other moves from here, but I do think something like take, maybe bishop d3, for example, and then down the road trying to attack in the kingside direction is probably what white should be working towards in a position like this, especially because the pawn chain is pointing towards the king side where we have extra space. Black can, get on the half-open c-file pretty quickly, but I think, we might do something like maybe take it, and maybe some kind of like knight g5 and, maneuver over towards attacking on the king side at some point is potentially an idea. So, yeah, pawn to e5 is definitely better than what I played in the game. In the game, I made a pretty big mistake, just calculation oversight. I played the move bishop to g5, pinning the knight. But what's the problem with this here?
I think black is just going to win the pawn anyway. I think black can take c3, and then if you take here, then you can just take this, and still same problem. The pawn is still going to fall. And I think if the pawn takes, then I would assume that like if black takes this pawn, I think it's actually safe to do, just because like if you take, then he can just take back with the other knight, right? So I think the pin doesn't really work out. Maybe I'm wrong, but it looks to me that doesn't work out.
Yeah, this is why it doesn't work here. You can simply take the knight on c3, and then black takes on e4 with the bishop. And then the important thing is that bishop takes f6 doesn't really do much for white, because you can simply take back with the knight on f6. protecting the bishop, and then white's just down a pawn without really any compensation at this point. So this is the way that the game went. He did play bishop takes c3. He took on e4. We're down a pawn. It's not, a great position for us by any means. But, given the fact that we got to this position, we kind of have to make the best of what we can. So definitely no advantage for white here being down a pawn, but, just because we lost a pawn doesn't mean we just lose the game instantly. So now we're going to try to play from behind as white here, essentially. So it's white's move here. There is no one best plan, I will say, in this position from white's point of view. You kind of just have to, stir up as much trouble as possible, as the game goes on. So see what you would come up with for in white's shoes here from this position.
Yeah, I don't know about a plan in particular, but I guess one move in the position just right here kind of jumps out at me a little bit. I think maybe the move knight e5 kind of looks like a good move to cause some trouble, because if black takes, then we just have this pin, which is really good for us. H6, take. We could take there. We could just we just leave the pawn. Honestly, I think either way, it opens up black's king a little bit, which is probably good for us, considering we're down material, and we can kind of build off of that. We also could just, after this, we could even make it a little bit more complicated. H6, G5, and then takes. And if he wants to retain the material, then he's going to have to really mess up his pawn structure, which is good. I think two double isolated H pawns, if that's if that's the pawn advantage that black has, and that's decent for us. So something like that is decent. I also like the fact that we're threatening to take this. Queen takes, and then we could just take here if we wanted to, and then we could be able to just take the bishop. Or if black saves the bishop like he should, then at least we have the double pawns again, and that's decent for us, and we can kind of work around that. I think maybe trying to double up one of black's pawns could be a way to minimize the advantage. The downside to this plan obviously is that we are trading off pieces while we're down material, but I think if we are able to double the pawn and put it in a position where we can pressure it, I think it should be fine for us. I don't think trading off pieces is going to matter a ton as long as we keep all the heavy pieces on the board. I think we could have at least a little bit of counterplay going into maybe a more heavy pieces based endgame if we some of the minor pieces that are on the board.
Okay, so you like this idea of knight to e5, creating some threats that black has to be a little bit careful about. Like you said, we are at the very least threatening knight takes knight, take this knight, then take the bishop, so black needs to immediately respond to that in some way. So what do you think black's going to play here?
Let's see.
There's kind of, just to preface it, there is kind of one best move for black to play. Well, technically there's two moves that are good for black in this position, according to the computer, but one of them's a bit, feels very computerish. I don't think anybody would play that way in a game. So there's kind of one best, human answer, I would say, for black at this point. Which is what makes this knight e5 move good. If black only has one good move available and he maybe doesn't find it, then then we're right back in the game, for example.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, so now we have to kind of think how black's going to respond.
Maybe bishop d5 is a good move. Just taking the bishop, obviously, because that's what's immediately being threatened. And then I think if we just go ahead with our plan and we take, black can take back with the queen and kind of accept these double pawns with, I guess, with the added benefit for black that maybe white will take here, black will take back, and then maybe you have f6 is supporting e5 and stuff like that. So maybe he can kind of find a use for those double pawns later on, which would be better. I think that's probably. That seems to me to be the most logical move for black here. That's probably what I would like seriously consider if I was in black shoes, because that just, you know, if you have to save the bishop at some point, it makes sense to put it on that nice like outpost square. I just don't see a good reason not to do that. So that's probably what I would do.
Okay. It does end up against bishop d5. White has a good answer here.
Okay.
So before I give what that is, maybe with that knowledge, see if you can find a better move for white.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could white maybe just, I mean, this seems a little simple, but could white maybe just go bishop d3 with the idea that, actually, maybe take first and then bishop d3, with the idea that, like, black's kind of vacated, I guess black's kind of vacated this diagonal, and then now we can use it. Maybe go c4 to trap the bishop if black's not careful. Maybe, like, if we trap the knight, we could go queen h5 and threaten mate or something like that. So bishop d3, possibly followed by c4.
Yeah, that's ultimately the idea here. If black does play the move bishop d5 to try to keep the bishop safe, yeah, bishop d3 is actually a pretty big problem for black, because now pawn to c4 is a threat. We're still threatening sometimes knight takes knight, bishop takes, and maybe queen h5 types of ideas. And I think the main thing here with c4 is it's just tough for black to stop that. Like, even if black plays a move like pawn to c5 to give the bishop a free square, I think white can still get a pretty big advantage here. Maybe we take the knight, we hit the bishop backwards, and then I think we might be able to... Oh yeah, there's actually a nice little tactic here. White can win material from here. See if you can find the way to win a piece.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be something along the lines of bishop takes f6, pawn takes, and then like queen h5. Just because that checkmate just seems annoying to stop. I think black's probably gonna have to do something like f5. We could even just go g4 right away. Something like this seems pretty decent, and maybe good d5 as well.
Yeah, you got the right idea. It definitely starts with bishop takes f6 to rip open the king side. There's a couple of moves that are good here. I think the one I was originally thinking of when I said, think about this position, I was thinking about, I think, queen g4 check, or maybe it's queen h5. Yeah, maybe queen h5 right away. Black plays maybe f5. And then you said maybe g4. I think we could even do like pawn to d5 here, which is nice. Because if black takes the pawn, then we can take on f5. We threaten the queen, and we threaten checkmate. And if he doesn't take the pawn, well, then he's going to have to be a bit concerned about us taking the bishop at some point. I think another answer here that's also very nice is bishop takes h7, though, also.
Oh yeah, that looks nice, actually. Yeah. No, because with the idea that like king takes queen h5 d5, and then you have like pin stuff, maybe.
Well, the idea here is actually, so queen h5, king moves, check him back over to the h file, and then the rook comes in.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Okay.
A very nice rook lift from the other side of the board, and black is just done for at this point. So mainly here, what we're seeing is, okay, maybe all of this isn't forced after bishop d5 by any means, but after bishop d5, black is going to get himself into trouble with this bishop d3 move. It ends up that black's best move is bishop back to g6, which is what he played in the game. The computer actually gives the move queen a5 as also being a defense, but I really don't think anybody's going to play queen a5. The idea of queen a5 is that you're like pinning the e5 knight, and if something like this happens, black is not losing a piece at this point. I don't think anybody's playing that, though. That seems a little computerish, in my opinion. But he played bishop g6 in the game. Probably what I should have done here in hindsight is maybe just taken the bishop and then played around the compensation of the pair of bishops here. So even though we're down a pawn, black has doubled pawns. We have two bishops versus two knights. I think Matt Black is a little bit better here because of the material advantage, but the pair of bishops should give us like decent chances of stirring up trouble as the game goes on.
Yeah.
What I did in the game was I played the move pawn to f4 instead. Now he did play queen a5, getting away from the pin. I played queen to b2 to guard the pawn and counterattack his pawn. He played knight b6, hitting my bishop. I retreated the bishop to e2. He jumped the knight to d5. Now he's threatening my pawn and maybe even f6. Probably what I should do here is pawn to c4, just to save the pawn and counterattack the knight. And if something like this happens, if he ever plays f6, I'll take his g6 bishop. And probably, again, white's not in too bad of shape. Even if black wins this pawn, he'll be pinned, and I think white's got pretty good compensation with the extra space and stuff like that. What I did in the game was the move pawn to f5. And then after pawn to f5, black found... well, my idea with pawn to f5 was if he had taken the pawn, I was going to play bishop d2 and kind of get close to trapping his queen. That was my idea. But black found the best move in this position. Instead of doing anything about the bishop, he played the move queen takes c3.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's counterattacking my queen, and if I trade queens, the problem is my bishop is also hit. Okay. So this is pretty much what happened in the game. I took his bishop, he got my knight, he got my bishop. And then here, he also found a really precise move. This will be probably our final quick exercise for the lesson. So it's black's move here. See if you can find the best move for black at this point. Because white's got a couple of threats, but black does have one really important defensive move here.
All right, can black just play f6 because we're kind of making a fork here, and then we're also at the same time not really allowing this. I just didn't see a great way for black to save this and also deal with this like pawn takes or knight takes stuff. So I think maybe f6 just to attack two things and kind of leave white with he's gonna take our knight, but he's also gonna lose something else.
Yep, that's the move here. Pawn to f6 is the key defensive move. If you move the knight, then there's like pawn takes f7 that gets a little bit tricky, but pawn to f6 takes away that threat, hits both the pieces. I think in the game, what did I do in the game here? I took on h7. No, sorry, I took the knight on e2 first. And now the question is, which of these are you taking, though? You take the knight or you take the bishop?
I think with the knight, we just drop the pawn, which is not great. I'm just trying to see if taking the bishop has any issue. I don't see any issue with taking the bishop. If the knight goes to f7 or something like that, then I think we're fine, actually, just because we're just going to take the pawn. So I think there's not... I just don't see a real issue with taking the bishop right here. I think that's fine.
Okay, so if you take the bishop... I think if we take the bishop, the issue that we might run into here is that after, let's say, the rooks get traded for a moment, and then maybe white plays this move, maybe rook to b1, with the idea to play pawn a5, kick the knight, and take the pawn on b7. It's actually a little bit awkward for black all of a sudden, even though black is ahead 2 pawns, because, a5 and rook takes b7 is kind of tough to stop here. Then pretty much the question here about which piece should we take is which piece is better in this kind of position. And it ends up that the knight is better than the bishop. The knight, especially if we take the bishop, this knight's going to kind of just stay super active in the center of the board. Whereas if we take the knight, now this pawn on g6 is threatened. And the bishop is just not as useful in this position. It doesn't really have... everything of black's is pretty much on a light square. Or at least a lot of black's potential pawn weaknesses are on light squares. And this is the better option for black to capture here, which is what he did in the game. I took on h7 afterwards, then I took on e5. He went ahead and traded rooks. He took the pawn on a4, and now I'm just down 2 pawns, and he's going to just start rolling the queenside pawns very, very, very quickly here. After that, I played pawn to h4. He played king back to g8 to stop my rook from invading. Bishop here, check. Here, and then after he played the move a5, I resigned in white shoes here. There's just not really much I can do to stop the pawns from just marching down the board, and I'm down 2 pawns on top of it. So, main thing here I'd say from this particular game, I definitely made a tactical mistake in the opening where I lost a pawn. That was definitely not a great decision. I should have played e5 or bishop d3 or something like that instead to not lose material. Even though I lost the pawn, though, it's definitely not the end of the world. There's definitely ways we can still stir up some trouble for our opponent and create some tricky situations for them. But eventually, yeah, like I probably should have played pawn to c4 here instead. I pretty much gave him too many pawns is what happened. I missed this queen takes c3 idea, and then he found the best defensive moves for the rest of the game. And then he was just up a couple pawns with the winning position at the end of everything. So this was a game against, I think this particular player was rated like 2,400 at this point. So very strong player, of course. And yeah, we can kind of see that he, I put him under a little bit of pressure, but he found all the right defensive moves. He calculated better than I did. And yeah, that's, that's kind of just the difference between the different levels of players and stuff like that. So definitely a lot that I learned from this game way back in the past. Again, this game was played like over 10 or 11 years ago. But yeah, definitely a good experience getting to play such a tough player back at this point and learn from this game. So anyways, though, Jack, that'll do it for us today. We'll get back together next Thursday for the next lesson. We'll look at some more stuff during that next one. And yeah, we'll talk again then, and I will see you next week. Okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, have a good rest of the day then, Jack. Talk to you later.
All right.
Hopefully you enjoyed watching along with this lesson and solving the positions yourself. If you did find this kind of content informational and enjoyed it, then I would really appreciate you letting me know in a comment below the video. You can also click the like button and subscribe to the channel. That would also help me out quite a bit in terms of the YouTube algorithm. And if you would like to get a coaching session yourself, then you can check out my website, nextlevelchesscoaching.com, and you can contact me through the contact form on that website. The links are going to be in the video description below. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you around in the next one, and hope you have a good rest of the day.